A boy's simple act of kindness unleashes a chain of miracles. In a quiet American town, a young boy named Jack stumbles upon a life-changing opportunity, a moment so simple, yet so powerful. Armed with nothing but a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, Jack reaches out to a homeless man on the street, unaware that this small act of kindness will spark a ripple effect that touches the lives of many. Days later, a knock on the door from the police reveals just how deeply Jack's gesture impacted the man, setting off a heartwarming story of hope, transformation, and the extraordinary power of love and compassion. This is a story that reminds us all that even the smallest actions can create waves of change, far beyond what we can imagine. It was a crisp fall afternoon in a small American town, the kind where everyone knows their neighbors, and kids still play outside until the streetlights flicker on. Jack, a 7-year-old boy with bright eyes and a curious spirit, was on his way home from school, clutching a peanut butter and jelly sandwich his mom had packed for him that morning. As he walked down the familiar streets, he saw him again, the man who always sat quietly on the corner near the old grocery store. He had a long beard, tired eyes, and clothes that looked worn and tattered. Jack didn't know much about him, except that he seemed lonely, always sitting there, watching the world pass by. That day, something stirred in Jack's heart. His mom always told him to be kind, and he had heard stories in Sunday school about helping those in need. Without thinking twice, Jack approached the man, sandwich in hand. Mister, are you hungry? Jack asked, his voice soft and innocent. The man looked up, surprised by the small voice addressing him. His eyes were filled with a mixture of weariness and surprise. I am, kid. But you don't have to give me that. It's yours. Jack smiled, pushing the sandwich forward. I want you to have it. My mom always says it's good to share. The man hesitated for a moment, but the sincerity in Jack's eyes was too pure to refuse. He accepted the sandwich with trembling hands, his voice barely a whisper. Thank you, kid. You don't know what this means to me. Jack beamed and waved goodbye, not thinking much of it afterward. It was just a sandwich, after all. But for the man, it was more than that. It was a gesture of kindness that reminded him that even in the darkest times, there was still goodness in the world. Days passed, and Jack went about his usual routine, school, homework, and playing outside with his friends. He had almost forgotten about the man until one evening, there was a knock on the door. His mother, Susan, opened it, only to find 2 police officers standing on the porch. Is everything all right, officers? Susan asked, her voice full of concern. The officers exchanged glances before one spoke. Ma'am, we're looking for your son, Jack. Susan's heart skipped a beat, and she immediately called for Jack. The boy appeared, eyes wide, wondering what the police could possibly want with him. The officers knelt down to his level, a gentle smile on their faces. Jack, one of them said, a few days ago, did you give a sandwich to a man near the grocery store? Jack nodded, now more curious than afraid. Yes, sir. He looked hungry. The officer's eyes softened. That man wanted us to find you. He's been searching for you ever since. You see, Jack, that man was in a very bad situation. He'd lost everything, his family, his home, and even hope. But that day, when you gave him that sandwich, it did more than just fill his stomach. It reminded him that there's still kindness in the world. He went to the police station to tell us that your small act of kindness saved his life. Tears welled up in Susan's eyes as she realized the magnitude of what her son had done. Jack, still trying to understand everything, looked up at his mom. But it was just a sandwich. The officer continued. To you, it may have been just a sandwich. But to him, it was a reminder that someone still cared. It gave him the strength to reach out for help. He's now getting the support he needs to turn his life around. And it's all because of you." Jack's heart swelled with a mix of pride and humility. He had always been taught that small things matter, but he never knew how much. That simple gesture had made a ripple effect, changing the course of someone's life. As the officers left, Jack's mom hugged him tightly, whispering, "I'm so proud of you, Jack. You did something so beautiful." That night, as Jack lay in bed, he thought about the man and the sandwich. He realized that kindness doesn't always have to be grand gestures. Sometimes it's the simplest things, a smile, a meal, a moment of compassion, that have the power to change a life. And from that day on, Jack made it his mission to always look for ways to be kind, no matter how small the act might seem. Because he now knew that even the smallest seed of kindness could grow into something far bigger than he ever imagined. The man on the corner? His name was Robert, and thanks to Jack's simple act, he found a path back to hope. He got in touch with his estranged family, found shelter, and began rebuilding his life. And every time he looked at a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, he smiled, remembering the little boy who reminded him that kindness still exists in the world. Jack's life continued as any 7-year-old's would: school days, playing with friends, and learning new things every day. But deep inside, something had changed. That moment with the homeless man, Robert, left a lasting imprint on his young heart. Jack began to see the world differently, with a sharper awareness of the people around him. He realized that even in his small town, there were others who, like Robert, were struggling, but often invisible to the busy eyes of the world. One Saturday afternoon, as Jack and his mom were running errands, he noticed an elderly woman carrying heavy bags down the street. Without thinking, Jack ran up to her. "Can I help you with your bags?" The woman looked surprised at first, but then smiled warmly. "That's very kind of you, young man. Thank you." Jack eagerly took one of the heavy bags and walked with her to her house just down the road. As they walked, the woman talked about how she had recently lost her husband and was finding it hard to do everything on her own. Jack listened quietly, remembering what the police officer had told him about how small acts of kindness could make a big difference. When they reached her house, the woman, whose name was Mrs. Thompson, invited Jack and his mother inside for some lemonade. Over the next few weeks, Jack made a point to stop by Mrs. Thompson's house regularly, helping her with groceries, raking leaves in her yard, or simply keeping her company. The two formed an unlikely but special bond. Jack's mom was amazed at how her little boy's heart seemed to grow bigger with every kind act he did. Meanwhile, Robert, the man Jack had given the sandwich to, was also undergoing a transformation. The simple gesture from the boy had lit a spark of hope within him that had been missing for years. Robert had reached out to a local shelter, where he received the help he so desperately needed. Slowly but surely, he began to rebuild his life. Through the shelter's resources, Robert found a job and a small apartment. But more importantly, he reconnected with his family. He hadn't spoken to his daughter in over a decade, too ashamed of the path his life had taken. But now, with new courage, he reached out. It wasn't easy, but after several heartfelt conversations, the two began to rebuild their relationship. One day, as Robert sat in his small, tidy apartment, he couldn't stop thinking about the boy who had changed everything for him. He knew he needed to thank Jack properly, to let him know just how much that one act of kindness had transformed his life. With the help of the shelter, Robert tracked down Jack's address. One sunny afternoon, there was another knock on Jack's door. This time, when Jack's mom opened it, she found Robert standing there, holding a small gift in his hands. His face was filled with gratitude and peace, a stark contrast to the man Jack had met on the corner weeks ago. Jack came running to the door, surprised to see the man again. "Hi," he said excitedly, remembering the sandwich and the conversation they had shared. Robert knelt down to Jack's level, his voice thick with emotion. "I wanted to come by and thank you, Jack." What you did for me that day, giving me that sandwich, it saved my life. You reminded me that there is still kindness in the world, and because of you, I got the help I needed. I'm back on my feet now, and I've even reconnected with my family. You have no idea how much that means to me." Jack, always humble, simply smiled. "I'm glad you're doing better, Robert." Robert handed Jack the small gift, a hand-carved wooden figure of a little boy holding a sandwich. "I made this for you," Robert explained. "It's to remind you that your kindness changed someone's life." Jack accepted the gift, his eyes wide with awe. He hadn't realized just how much that small moment meant to Robert until now. As Robert stood to leave, Jack's mom invited him to stay for dinner, and they all sat around the table, sharing stories and laughter. That evening, as the sun set and Robert headed home, Jack sat in his room holding the wooden figure. He thought about all the little moments that had happened since he gave that sandwich, helping Mrs. Thompson, the knock on his door from the police, and now Robert's transformation. He realized that kindness wasn't just about one big act. It was about the small, everyday choices to see people, to care, and to act. From that day forward, Jack made it his mission to continue spreading kindness wherever he went. Whether it was helping a neighbor, sharing his lunch with a friend, or simply smiling at someone who seemed to be having a bad day, Jack knew that the smallest actions could make the biggest difference. And just like the sandwich he had shared with Robert, Jack's kindness rippled through the lives of those around him, leaving a legacy of love, compassion, and hope. As Jack grew older, his heart for helping others only expanded. He became known in his community as the boy who cared deeply about everyone he met, no matter their background or circumstances. His story with Robert had inspired not only his family, but many people in the town to look at kindness in a new light. Jack's small act had started a chain reaction, and now kindness seemed to spread everywhere. In school, Jack's teachers noticed a difference too. He was always the first to lend a hand to a classmate, to share his lunch, or to stand up for someone who needed it. His friends admired his compassion and, over time, they started following his example. Soon, Jack wasn't the only one making a difference. His friends joined in, and together they started small projects to help others in their community. One day, Jack's teacher asked the class to work on a project called Acts of Kindness. Each student was encouraged to think of a way they could help someone in need and make it a reality. For Jack, this project wasn't just an assignment, it was a way of life. He thought back to Robert and the difference one simple sandwich had made, and he wanted to do something similar, something that would touch even more lives. After talking with his mom, Jack had an idea. He decided to start a food drive to help feed the homeless in his town. He called it Sandwiches for Hope, in honor of the sandwich he had given to Robert that started it all. With the help of his school and the community, Jack began collecting food and making sandwiches to distribute at local shelters and on the streets where people were most in need. At first, it started small, just a few sandwiches here and there. But word spread quickly, and soon more and more people wanted to get involved. Local businesses began donating food and supplies, and volunteers of all ages joined Jack's cause. Every weekend, Jack and a group of volunteers would pack hundreds of sandwiches, each one made with love and care, and deliver them to those in need. One Saturday, as Jack and his mom were packing sandwiches, Robert showed up to help. He had heard about Sandwiches for Hope and wanted to be a part of it. "You gave me more than just a sandwich, Jack," Robert said as they worked side by side. "You gave me hope. Now it's my turn to give that hope to others." Together, they distributed the food, sharing smiles and conversations with those they met along the way. For Jack, it wasn't just about feeding people, it was about reminding them that they mattered, that someone cared. As he handed out the sandwiches, he remembered how Robert had said that simple act had saved his life. Jack now saw that the impact of kindness was far greater than he could have ever imagined. Months passed, and Sandwiches for Hope grew into something much bigger than Jack had anticipated. What had started as a small school project had turned into a community-wide movement. Local news stations picked up the story, and soon, people from neighboring towns wanted to get involved. Jack's simple act of kindness had inspired an entire network of generosity, all stemming from one sandwich. But for Jack, it wasn't about the attention or the recognition. It was about the people, the individuals whose lives were touched by the kindness that had once been shown to Robert, and now was being passed on to so many others. He had learned at a young age that love and compassion could transform lives, and that knowledge stayed with him, guiding him through every step of this journey. One evening, after another successful day of delivering food, Jack and his mom sat together on the porch. She looked at him with pride in her eyes. "You've done something amazing, Jack. You've turned a small act into something that's changing lives." Jack smiled, but his heart remained humble. "It's not just me, Mom. It's everyone. It's Robert. It's the people who help, who donate, who care. I just gave a sandwich. Everyone else is carrying it forward." His mom nodded, her heart full of love for her son. Sometimes all it takes is one small spark to light a fire of kindness. And that's exactly what you did. As the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Jack reflected on everything that had happened since that day he gave Robert a sandwich. He realized that kindness, once given, has a way of multiplying. It doesn't stop with one person. It spreads, like ripples in a pond, touching lives far beyond what we can see. And as he sat there, holding the wooden figure Robert had carved for him, Jack made a promise to himself. No matter where life took him, no matter how old he got, he would always choose kindness. He would always look for the person in need, the one who felt forgotten or invisible, and he would show them the same love and compassion that had changed Robert's life, and his own. Jack didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain: the world could always use more kindness, and he was determined to be a part of that change. The story of Jack and Robert teaches us that kindness is not just a one-time act, it's a way of life. Each small gesture, whether it's sharing a meal, helping someone with their groceries, or simply listening to someone's story, has the power to change lives. And the beauty of kindness is that it doesn't stop with one person. It spreads, creating a chain reaction that touches hearts and souls far beyond what we could ever imagine. Let us all be like Jack, looking for opportunities to show kindness in the simplest of ways, knowing that even the smallest acts can make the biggest difference. You never know whose life you might touch, or how they, in turn, will carry that kindness forward into the world. Let this story inspire you to take action today. Just like Jack's simple act of kindness, your smallest gestures can have the power to change someone's life. Look around you. Who needs a word of encouragement, a helping hand, or even just a smile? Don't wait for the perfect moment. Create it. Start a ripple of kindness that could spread further than you ever imagined. You have the power to make a difference, and the world is waiting for it. Go out and be the light in someone's darkness today.